Welcome once again to Esoteric Guardian. Today, we're going to explore one of the most influential, mysterious, and misunderstood figures in the history of occultism, the infamous Eliphas Levi, a man whose doctrines have shaped ceremonial magic, modern Satanism, and even the inner workings of secret societies. But what very few people understand is that beneath the elegant symbols and philosophical writings, Levi was transmitting something far more dangerous, a doctrine that involves blood, suffering, and an entire ecosystem of astral entities that most occultists prefer not to talk about. This is the forbidden side of Eliphas Levi, and today we're pulling the curtain. Born in 1810 as Alphonse Louis Constant, better known as Eliphas Levi, he began his life far from the world of occultism. Raised within the strict doctrines of the Catholic Church, he was destined to become a priest. But something within him resisted submission. His hunger for forbidden knowledge was stronger than the promise of salvation. Torn between faith and rebellion, he abandoned the seminary before ordination. From that moment, his life spiraled into a relentless quest, an attempt to decode the hidden architecture behind reality itself. And through this pursuit, he became the mind responsible for rebuilding the very framework of modern Western magic. His genius lay not in creating something new, but in transforming something ancient. He took the scattered debris of medieval sorcery, Kabbalah, alchemy, Hermeticism, Christian mysticism, astrology, and fused it into a single operational system, a metaphysical machine designed to interface with the invisible. His masterpiece, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, wasn't just another occult text. It became the blueprint that would shape everything from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn to Thelema and the entire ceremonial tradition that survives today. One of his most groundbreaking contributions was the reinterpretation of the tarot. For centuries, the cards had been seen as a tool for divination, nothing more than a fortune teller's deck. He shattered that perception completely. For him, the tarot wasn't a game. It was a portable map of the universe, a graphical representation of cosmic laws, archetypes, and metaphysical forces. Most importantly, he is the one who popularized the direct correspondence between the 22 major arcana and the 22 paths of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, a framework that every serious esoteric order uses to this day. In his hands, the tarot became more than a mystical curiosity. It was a key, a coded manual for understanding the invisible structure that governs both the cosmos and the human soul. Despite the dangerous mechanics revealed in his writings, his philosophy wasn't aligned with chaos or corruption. Quite the opposite. Unlike later figures such as Crowley, who deliberately sought to transcend and violate moral boundaries, his doctrine was fundamentally theurgical, focused on harmony, on aligning the microcosm with the macrocosm, on reconnecting the fragmented human soul with the divine source. Yes, he openly exposed how ritual works, how symbols, gestures, magnetic fluids, even blood, amplify intention within the astral plane. But he constantly warned that the astral light is an indifferent force, a mirror, a transmitter. It amplifies whatever is encoded into it, whether divine or profane. His system was not designed to unleash chaos, but to restore equilibrium. It was a ladder towards spiritual ascent, not a weapon of desecration. Still, the dangers were undeniable. The same keys that open the gates of the divine can just as easily unlock the corridors of the abyss. He insisted that mastery over the self was the absolute prerequisite for any magical operation. Without discipline, clarity, and sovereignty over one's own desires, the forces summoned through ritual could spiral out of control, consuming the operator rather than serving them. This is why the diagrams left behind, pentagrams, circles, ritual geometries, aren't just aesthetic flourishes. They are engineering blueprints for consciousness. Circuit boards designed to regulate the flow of energy between the material and the invisible. Because the astral light is neutral, it doesn't care about intent. It responds to structure, will, and force. And whether it leads to ascension or destruction depends entirely on what the magician carries within. This is the paradox that defines his legacy. On the surface, a doctrine of harmony, sacred balance, and theurgical ascent. Beneath it, a brutally honest manual for manipulating the fabric of reality. A system that acknowledges, without illusion, the existence of astral predators, psychic vampirism, and the terrifying power hidden in ritual mechanics. At the core of his philosophy lies a statement as audacious as it is precise. Magic is not superstition, nor is it a collection of irrational beliefs. It is both a science and a religion, a technology for interacting with the hidden architecture of reality, and simultaneously a sacred path designed to elevate the soul towards the divine. He described it with absolute clarity. Magic is the traditional science of the secrets of nature, not folklore, not primitive mysticism, but a coded language passed down through initiates, a system built from symbols, gestures, numbers, and sacred geometry, carefully encrypted not because of secrecy for secrecy's sake, but because the forces it manipulates are dangerous, volatile, and utterly indifferent to human morality. In his view, the universe is not a random, chaotic expanse. It is a machine, a living organism governed by immutable laws that apply equally to matter, mind, and spirit. And the magician's role is to become the engineer of that system, the one who learns to input commands into the cosmic machinery through rituals, words of power, numbers, and intention. This is where one of the most controversial ideas in his work appears: the concept of the universal machine, powered by an invisible force he referred to as the great magical agent, a fluidic medium that permeates every plane of existence. In his writings, this force takes a specific name: the astral light. Neither fully material nor entirely spiritual, it exists in that liminal space between worlds, a subtle energy field, the electromagnetic nervous system of the cosmos, the bridge between thought and form, between desire and manifestation. But this isn't just a poetic abstraction. The astral light follows a very specific architecture, a blueprint, and that blueprint is the Kabbalistic tree of life. For him, the 10 Sephirot represent energetic modulators, frequencies through which divine energy filters as it descends from pure spirit into dense matter. Each Sephira corresponds to a different mode of existence, a distinct vibration of the astral light. The 22 paths connecting them operate as circuits, channels through which this energy flows, enabling the ascent or descent of consciousness through different planes. This is precisely why the tarot, the Hebrew alphabet, and the tree of life are inseparably intertwined in his doctrine, a symbolic interface that allows the magician to understand, navigate, and modify the laws that govern both the physical and the spiritual. But the most unsettling part is that this force is morally blind. It doesn't care whether it's used for creation or destruction, for healing or harm. It responds only to structure, to intention, to frequency, and to will. The formulas work, the geometry executes, the ritual commands are obeyed. Whether the practitioner fully understands what they are tapping into is irrelevant to the mechanism itself. This is why, for him, magic isn't superstition. It's applied metaphysics, a technology for interfacing with the operating system of reality. And this is precisely why he repeatedly warned that without spiritual discipline, without inner sovereignty, without alignment between mind, emotion, and will, the magician inevitably becomes a victim of the very forces they hoped to control. Because mastery over this concept requires more than knowledge of symbols or the memorization of rituals. It demands absolute dominion over the self, over fear, over obsession, over desire. Because in the end, the secret was never about learning how to command the universe. It was always about learning how to command yourself. So the universe has no choice but to obey. Among all the concepts in Levi's doctrine, none is more pivotal or more dangerous than the astral light. This is not a metaphor, not a symbol. It is a substance, a fluidic medium that forms the hidden infrastructure of reality itself, the nervous system of the cosmos, the bloodstream of existence, the electromagnetic skeleton upon which both spirit and matter are suspended. Every object, every being, every thought, every word ever spoken, every symbol ever drawn, every gesture, whether conscious or unconscious, leaves a ripple, an imprint within this subtle field. Nothing escapes it, nothing exists outside of it. It is the connective tissue of the universe. But the astral light is not passive. It is not background noise. It is interactive, programmable, responsive. It behaves like a living code, an operating system beneath the surface of the world, waiting to be inscribed with meaning, direction, or manipulation. Every magical act, whether a whispered prayer, a complex ritual, a hastily drawn sigil, or even the unspeakable release of blood, functions because it forces this fluid into a precise configuration, a pattern, a frequency, a distortion in the matrix that then cascades downward, from the mental to the psychic to the physical plane. This is not spiritual poetry, it's metaphysical engineering. It is the reason why symbols hold power, why sacred geometry works, why the vibration of words, words of power, can shape destinies. Because when the correct structure is impressed upon the astral fluid, reality has no choice but to obey. It cannot do otherwise. It must follow the pattern. But here lies the abyss. The astral light doesn't think. It doesn't judge. It doesn't care. It doesn't distinguish between the healing hands of the mystic or the knife of the sorcerer, between the summoning of angels or the manufacturing of monstrosities. It responds only to structure, to intention, to force. And this is where Levi's doctrine takes a turn most people are not prepared to face. Entities are patterns. Angels, demons, spirits, egregores, thought forms, they are not mere metaphysical hallucinations. They are coherent data clusters within the astral field. Structured distortions of the fluid that, when sustained long enough, either by faith, by ritual, by fear, or by obsession, become semi-autonomous. They develop inertia, gravitation, hunger. A demon is not a metaphor. It is a stable, self-reinforcing pattern within the electromagnetic fabric of reality, a parasite of structure, a ghost made of data, powered by the leaking energies of the human psyche. This is the true nature of invocation, of evocation, of prayer, of curse. It's the act of configuring reality itself, of bending the electromagnetic scaffolding of existence into something that speaks back, something that listens, something that answers. Whether that answer becomes a doorway to divinity or a trapdoor into madness depends entirely on the operator's capacity to command not just the ritual, but themselves. Because mastery over the astral fluid demands more than knowing how to draw a circle, recite a name, or trace a sigil. It demands mastery over the one thing that the machine cannot override: your own mind, your own emotion, your own will. Because in the end, and this is the brutal secret Levi tried to warn, you are either the architect of the pattern or you are its prey. In Dogme et Rituel de la Haute Magie, Levi described the universe as a living system woven from a subtle, omnipresent substance, the agent magique, also known as the lumière astrale or spiritus mundi. This fluid is the invisible framework behind all form and all force. Thought, memory, matter, desire, manifestation, every process, every structure emerges from its currents. Entities in his doctrine are crystallizations of this luminous fluid, not figments of imagination, nor phantoms in the folkloric sense, but autonomous structures of organized energy. They exist within the electromagnetic matrix of the universe, perceptible to the trained mind, capable of influence, and subject to precise laws. As Levi writes, the astral light is the universal mirror, the receptacle of forms, the reservoir of memories, and the vehicle of magnetism. The astral is not a singular, undifferentiated plane. It unfolds in layers, each governed by density, vibration, and proximity to matter or spirit. The lowest strata, shadowed by the inertia of Malkuth, are dense, heavy, and saturated with the unresolved residues of the human psyche. This is the domain of larvae, parasitic thought forms generated unconsciously through obsessive emotions, unresolved trauma, compulsions, and spiritual decay. They attach to the energetic field of a person and sustain themselves by amplifying the very impulses that created them. Beyond the lower zones, the fluid becomes more refined. In the intermediate astral, resonating through Yesod, Netzach, Hod, and Tifereth, arise more complex entities: elementals, thought forms, and egregores. Elementals are raw forces, tied to the classical elements, operating like semi-conscious energy clusters within the astral ecosystem. Thought forms are constructs shaped by deliberate intent or obsessive repetition. And egregores, the most powerful of these, are psychic superstructures formed by collective belief. Nations, religions, ideologies, secret societies, each surrounded by a field of living energy that guides, feeds, and shapes its members in return. Above this lies the supernal astral, whose architecture mirrors the higher Sephirot, Gebura, Chesed, Binah, Chokmah, and Kether. Here dwell the entities traditionally identified as angelic orders, intelligences of perfect symmetry, expressions of cosmic law, harmonic regulators of the universal machine. Their substance is the most refined strata of the lumière astrale, free from the residues of matter, radiating pure archetypal force. By contrast, demonic intelligences emerge from dissonance within the fluid. They are not failed angels in a mythological sense, but patterns of destabilization, structures that feed on fragmentation, entropy, obsession, and spiritual collapse. When the currents of the astral light are forced into dissonant configurations, these vortices of entropy stabilize into predatory forms. Levi is unambiguous about the mechanism. All entities, whether luminous or malignant, are generated through the same process: the compression of the agent magique into coherent form, structured by symbolic encoding, ritual geometry, will, vibration, and offering. Ritual is the operating language of the universe. The pentacle, the divine name, the traced circle, the sacrifice, each acts as a command, forcing the fluid into a precise resonance that stabilizes a pattern within the astral continuum. The Kabbalistic tree is not a symbolic accessory. It is the actual map, of this architecture. Larval entities cling to the base, near the shadows of Malkuth and the shells of the Qliphoth. Elementals surge within the lunar tides of Yesod and the vital circuits connecting the lower Sephirot. Egregores pulse through the dynamic currents of Netzach, Hod, and Tifereth, feeding on collective emotion, faith, and identity. The angelic intelligences, stationed within the supernal triad, function as luminous filters between the infinite and the finite, stabilizing the descent of archetypal forces into creation. Mastery of this system demands more than knowledge of names or symbols. The magician must become the regulator of his own field, aligning Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama with the grand architecture of the cosmos. As Levi warns, he who does not command the light becomes its slave. And yet, this mastery is not the final destination. The astral is a scaffolding, not a sanctuary. A technician may learn to manipulate its currents, to summon, to banish, to command. But the ultimate aim is not dominion over entities. It is transcendence over the need for them. To rise beyond the gravitational pull of the fluid, to merge the fragmented self with the source, where the operator no longer commands, because command is no longer necessary. Eliphas Levi was very clear about this. Magic isn't about candles, pretty symbols, or mysterious words. It's a technology, a way of operating on something very real, an invisible substance he called the astral light, the magical agent, or spiritus mundi. A fluid that connects everything with everything, the bridge between thought and reality. It's the medium that allows desires, symbols, intentions, and even spirits to take form in the world. The problem is that this fluid is subtle, almost weightless. It doesn't just respond to wishful thinking. It has to be condensed, forced into structure. And that's where condensers come in. Specific materials capable of giving it weight, of making it obedient to the will. Out of everything that can serve that function, incense, resins, oils, metals, nothing holds more raw power than blood. And that's not symbolic. It's literal. Blood is saturated with biological magnetism. It contains the energetic imprint of the body, the mind, the emotions. Inside a single drop lives the full vibrational signature of the operator, their electromagnetic fingerprint, their entire energetic identity liquefied. The moment a drop of blood is released, no matter how small, the atmosphere shifts, the air changes, the tension becomes physical. What was just a circle on the floor, a symbol on parchment, a pattern drawn in wax, becomes a living circuit. The ritual goes from theoretical to real. The field ignites. The skin feels it before the mind does. The magnetic density spikes. And this isn't some archaic superstition. The grimoires understood this perfectly. Blood-sealed pacts, talismans anointed with sweat, saliva, or a drop of blood, not for theater, for mechanics. Because blood anchors the invisible into the visible. It fixes the astral pattern to the material world. Without it, the form might flicker. With it, the form stabilizes, holds, obeys. None of this happens in a void. Every operation moves inside a larger architecture, the same one encoded in the Kabbalistic tree of life. The level where this process takes place is called Yesod, the astral plane, the blueprint layer of reality, not physical, but not imaginary either. It's where patterns, symbols, and intentions gain shape before falling down into Malkuth, the material world. When blood is offered inside a properly structured ritual, what happens is an injection of raw life force into the astral matrix, locking the pattern in place. And depending on the design of the ritual, that force can also act as a bridge to pull in energies from higher spheres. Tifereth, the sphere of balance, solar harmony, and manifestation. Geburah, the sphere of force, rupture, destruction, war. Or Hod, the sphere of intellect, language, precision, and coded command. But here's where it gets serious. Blood amplifies everything. It doesn't care if the intent is pure or chaotic. It's a fuel source. Properly focused, it can strengthen protection, anchor a manifestation, or seal a pact. Without focus, it does something else entirely. It feeds the predators, because the astral is not a sterile space. The lower levels of Yesod are saturated with psychic debris, thought forms, obsessions, residues of trauma, shapeless parasites that float without purpose except to feed. What the grimoires call astral larvae. They're not demons in the religious sense, they're fragments, clusters of unstable energy. And when blood is spilled, raw magnetic essence, their instinct kicks in like a shark, sensing blood in water. They move, they swarm, they latch. That's why the circle isn't superstition. It's a shield. The sigils aren't decorations, they're algorithms. The words of power aren't poetry, they're vibrational commands. Structure is everything. Because if the blood falls outside the seal, it doesn't feed the ritual, it feeds the sludge. And when that happens, it isn't subtle. You feel it. The pressure behind your sternum, the tightness at the back of your neck, the overwhelming sensation that something hungry is watching and waiting for you to slip. There's no romanticism here, no mysticism for the sake of aesthetics. This is machinery, a biological interface with the invisible architecture of the universe. As he wrote bluntly, the ignorant sacrifice to chance, the wise sacrifice to command. Because in this framework, blood isn't worship, it isn't submission, it's data, it's biological code, a precise, measurable way to write a command into the operating system of reality itself. And the line between creating something and opening a door you can't close is exactly as thin as the skin you choose to cut. Of all the symbols he left behind, none carries more weight or more misunderstanding than the Baphomet. It isn't a character, a god, or a demon. It's a compressed code, a map of how reality functions when viewed through the lens of magic. Every piece of it is a formula, an operational diagram for those who know how to read it. The androgynous body fuses polarity, masculine and feminine, solar and lunar, emission and reception. The torso has both breasts and an exposed caduceus-like phallus because it encodes the mechanics of generation. Creation happens when forces collide, not when they remain isolated. Light needs darkness to be perceived. Spirit requires matter to express itself. No polarity stands alone. The tension between them is the engine that makes reality move. The goat's head represents the instinctive, the wild, the unrefined forces of nature, not as something to be rejected, but as something integrated, directed, and aligned. It sits on a human body, meaning instinct must be mastered by conscious form. The torch between the horns is consciousness itself, the flame of awareness that governs the entire structure. It's the same fire spoken of in every myth where knowledge is stolen from the gods. Awareness becomes the weapon that allows the operator to navigate, manipulate, and transcend the matrix of forces. Both arms are raised, pointing up and down, each carrying a word: solve and coagula, dissolution and coagulation, break, rebuild. Every magical operation cycles between these two states, the breaking down of patterns, forms, or psychic structures, followed by the reconstruction of a new configuration, more stable, more aligned, more powerful. The process applies to matter, mind, and spirit equally. Rituals, invocations, talismanic magic, and even internal alchemy all depend on this oscillation. The pentagram on the forehead locks another layer into place. 5 points: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. This is the sign of the microcosm, the perfected human, spirit ruling over matter. The orientation of the pentagram determines whether the being is aligned towards ascent or collapse. Upright, it signals harmony, consciousness mastering the material plane. Inverted, it signals disintegration, material forces suffocating spirit, leading to entropy, corruption, or parasitic inversion of life's processes. Baphomet isn't symbolic in the poetic sense. It's mechanical, a condensed representation of how the astral light operates. The fluid that binds all planes of reality moves through polarity. Every force in the universe exists in tension with its opposite: attraction and repulsion, emission and absorption, spirit and matter, masculine and feminine. The magician's role is not to choose one side, but to hold both in equilibrium and direct the current where it's needed. This is the hidden physics of magic, and Baphomet is its most explicit diagram. At the core of Baphomet's design is a truth that most people instinctively fear, even if they don't understand why. Because this image isn't just a symbol, it's a mirror of the machine they're already trapped in, whether they know it or not. The entire structure encodes the way the universe operates through polarity, and that polarity isn't abstract, it's mechanical. The serpents wrapped around the central rod aren't random. They represent the twin currents, masculine and feminine, emission and reception, force and form, coiling around the spine of the operator exactly as they coil through the channels of reality itself. This isn't just symbolic of the human body. It's a direct glyph of how energy ascends and descends the tree of life. Baphomet's very anatomy mirrors the middle pillar, the line of balance that runs from Malkuth, the material world, through Yesod, the astral matrix, rising into Tifereth, the center of harmony, and pushing upward toward Kether, the source. The wings symbolize the leap beyond the limitations of matter. The torch between the horns ignites exactly where the hidden Sephira of Darth sits, the abyss, the void between worlds, the gate where raw consciousness emerges from the collapse of duality. This is where knowledge becomes power, where blind polarity dissolves into awareness. Every limb, every gesture, every component of Baphomet is a compressed diagram of this process. The hands encode the push-pull of Netzach and Hod, victory and submission, force and intellect, which constantly battle to unbalance the current. The only reason the current doesn't fracture is because the entire weight of the system centers itself in Tifereth, the heart, the sun, the seat of coherent identity. Without that point of equilibrium, the structure collapses into chaos or stagnates into entropy. This is why the figure holds the solution to both creation and collapse. The caduceus represents the currents ascending from Malkuth, the densest plane of matter, moving through the spheres, igniting the flame of conscious awareness at Darth, and opening the upper channel toward Kether. But if the polarity fractures, if the current tilts too far into chaos or rigidity, the system feeds on itself. The astral light twists. The operator becomes prey to their own imbalance. And here's the part no one wants to hear. This machine, this current, never stops running, whether you command it or not. Whether you consciously operate the mechanics or whether it runs on autopilot, your thoughts feed it, your patterns feed it, your fears, your obsessions, your addictions. Everything you refuse to master writes code into the astral. The only real question is whether you're the one inputting commands, or whether the machine is just running its own program, with you trapped inside. This is the hidden terror behind Baphomet. It doesn't ask to be worshipped. It doesn't care about devotion. It demands to be understood. Because it's not external. It's the mirror of reality's operating system, both cosmic and personal. A glyph of how spirit becomes matter, how thought becomes form, how polarity either liberates or enslaves. The flame between the horns is the only exit. The conscious mind, awareness sharpened to a blade. The ability to step out of the loop, to rewrite the current instead of being written by it. Because if you fail to hold the current, it holds you. Once you start interacting with the astral light, whether consciously or not, something inevitable happens. You stop being invisible. Your energy leaves footprints. Your thoughts emit signals. Your rituals, your desires, your fears, all of them ripple into a field that's very much alive. And that field responds, not because it's malicious, but because that's simply how it works. The astral is saturated with unfinished processes, loose thoughts, echoes of pain, obsessions that were never resolved, fragments of desire left hanging by generations of minds. Over time, those fragments don't stay passive. They condense, they entangle, they start behaving like organisms, feeding on whatever keeps them alive. Levi calls them larvae, clusters of chaotic magnetism, entities built from psychic waste. They don't need bodies, they don't have agendas, but they operate like parasites. Their fuel is simple: emotional turbulence, obsession, rumination, fear, anything that spins in loops. The moment someone opens contact with the astral, whether through ritual, meditation, invocation, or blind curiosity, the signal goes out. Done right, with solid structures, the energy is contained, directed, focused. But if the framework is unstable, the signal leaks. And what's out there comes in. At first it feels subtle, strange fatigue, mood shifts, obsessive thoughts that feel louder than usual, a constant drain that sleep doesn't fix, but it escalates, fast. Thoughts that aren't yours start looping. Emotions spike for no reason. Anxiety, anger, despair, or a numbness that spreads until everything feels hollow. And if the attachment deepens, identity starts to blur. The line between what is you and what's feeding through you dissolves. Levi names this state astral obsession, a condition where the parasite no longer circles the aura from the outside. It moves in, starts embedding itself into the energetic circuits. From that point, the person's behavior becomes distorted. Addictions intensify, compulsions multiply, random self-sabotage starts to look inevitable, because part of the internal dialogue isn't actually theirs anymore. This is where spiritual decay unfolds, not because of demons, not because of some dark pact, simply because someone started channeling energy without knowing how to handle it. The astral light doesn't care about intent. It cares about structure, coherence, and polarity. If you leak energy, something always collects it. Levi is brutal on this point. Magic without ethical discipline becomes self-cannibalizing. The forces you try to control begin mirroring back everything unhealed, unmastered, and unaligned within you. If the operator isn't sovereign over their own thoughts, emotions, and desires, the field takes over. External chaos becomes internal. Entropy eats forward from the subtle into the material. And the cruel truth is that the astral doesn't stop processing. Your mind, your patterns, your unresolved wounds, all of it keeps imprinting into that fluid layer, whether you act consciously or not. The current keeps shaping. The field keeps reflecting. The outcome is always the same. Either you become the architect of that process, or you become a product of it. You can trace a straight, merciless line from Levi's doctrine to every living branch of the modern occult. It's not just intellectual influence, it's structural. His work isn't a relic, it's the software still running under the hood of Western magic. Before him, magic was fragmented chaos, disconnected grimoires, half-digested Kabbalah, folk rituals stitched to medieval superstition. He tore it apart and rebuilt it. His synthesis was surgical, violent even. Kabbalah, Hermeticism, alchemy, the tarot, Solomonic magic, all forced to speak a single language, a single operating system. The Golden Dawn built itself almost line by line on that foundation. Its entire ritual cosmology, the way it maps the Tree of Life, assigns planetary and elemental forces, codes rituals as energetic circuits, all of it descends directly from Dogme et Rituel de la Haute Magie. Levi made the Tree of Life not just a theological map, but a functional circuit board for consciousness engineering. Before him, the Sephirot were contemplative symbols. After him, they became voltage regulators for the flow of astral light. Crowley's entire system, Thelema, Liber, ABA, every working of Willer's law, is a weaponized mutation of Levi's core premise. The idea that the universe responds to directed will, codified into symbols, fired through polarity and structure, is textbook Levi, stripped of its ethical constraints and pushed to extremes. Even chaos magic, supposedly anarchic, still feeds from this lineage. Strip away the formal robes, the Latin invocations, the gold ink grimoires, and you're left with the same mechanics. That reality's structure bends wherever coherent pattern, intent, and symbolic charge are strong enough to hold it. Levi said it in the 19th century. Chaos magicians just swapped the incense for Sharpies and notebooks. But this isn't history. This isn't dead theory. You don't need to look far to see it alive. Modern occult forums are littered with threads like, "Why did my sigil backfire? Why do I feel drained after a manifestation ritual? Why am I seeing shadow figures after working with planetary seals?" The same physics, the same consequences, the same current Levi described, still running, still unforgiving, still reflecting every fracture, every leak, every misaligned pattern the operator feeds into it. And this is where most of the modern scene misses the point. Because his system isn't just about empowerment. It's a warning in the form of a map, a guide for those brave enough to realize that the same circuits that call angels also generate parasites. The same pathways that amplify your will also echo every unresolved trauma back into your field like a recursive loop. The astral doesn't negotiate. It mirrors. And that mirror is brutal. His reinterpretation of the tarot is a perfect example of this. Levi turned it into a compact, portable glyph of the Tree of Life. A symbolic machine encoding the descent of force from Kether into Malkuth, and more importantly, the map for reversing that flow. Each card isn't just an archetype, it's a node in the energetic scaffolding of the universe, a point where intention can hook into structure and shape what flows through it. His legacy is inescapable. Whether it's the Golden Dawn's ceremonial labyrinths, Crowley's weaponized Thelema, chaos magic's stripped-down hacking of reality, or the countless untrained practitioners flooding TikTok and Reddit, playing with forces they don't remotely understand. It's all running on his blueprint. He didn't invent magic. He translated it into a functional, repeatable system. And like any machine, it doesn't care who's pressing the buttons. It only cares whether the input matches the structure. That's the real inheritance. A system that doesn't sleep. A circuit that doesn't power down. Whether you consciously direct it, or whether it feeds on every leak, every blind spot, every unmastered impulse you leave hanging open.